Hi folks, thanks for stopping by today. In today's video I thought we would kind of get a discussion going on whether it's possible to make a living in music anymore or not. This might be a controversial video, I don't know, everyone's going to have different opinions and that's fine. But I thought it would be an interesting discussion and hopefully we can form a resource here for folks that are looking to get into this and see if it's worth their time to try and get into the music business full time, if there is a music business. Before I get started, I want to thank everybody for your support over the last few months, helping me build this channel out. As of this morning, at the time of shooting this video, I think we're 45 subscribers away from hitting that magic number of 1,000. So if you guys can help me out in any way by liking, subscribing, and commenting below, I'd really appreciate it to help me grow the channel out. And thank you so much. We had someone that bought me a coffee gave me a tip for one of the lesson videos I did, and I really appreciate that. So thank you so much. You know who you are. This came up because someone was asking me what advice I would give someone that is young that wants to get into the music business. And my initial thought was the music business is dead. And it is in a lot of ways. And let's discuss that. So let me just talk about, I've done mainly lessons full-time for most of my life, for like 40 some years. So I know I'm truly blessed, and I've been able to, make a living doing lessons and playing in bands and that sort of thing on a relatively local level. I'm going to talk about some of this in a minute, but I did live in Nashville from the early 90s till about 2000, and I learned a ton from living there. I'll tell you that much, and I'll be happy to share that with you as well. As you know, Tom Bukovac says on his channel. Asking the universe to allow you to make a living playing guitar is a pretty good reach, and that's probably true. But it used to be more possible than it is now, So is it possible to make a living playing music or playing guitar? It's possible, but it's probably not probable anymore, It's probably not likely. It's way more difficult now than it has been in the past. There'll always be artists that manage to break through, like a Taylor Swift or an Ed Sheeran, where everything lines up perfectly, their looks, all that stuff. And so I'm not here to shatter anybody's dreams, or try and tell you to not pursue a dream. I just am hopefully give you some information from an old guy sharing that will help you look at it differently and maybe help you go about it in a way that's a little more secure for yourself. And when we're talking about making a living in music, I mean being able to support yourself, okay, not living in your mom's basement, or having a rich family member pay your rent, anything like that. I mean being able to support yourself in a way that is meaningful and make adult money, okay, is what we're trying to talk about here today. Obviously, if you have some of those other things helping you out, you're good to go. One of the things I learned in Nashville, let's give you 3 things that I really learned. One is, behind every full-time successful musician, there's usually a spouse or a family member that's making a lot of money that's supporting them. Whether it's the spouse was a nurse that had a good nursing job, or the family member had money, that kind of thing. So that was the first eye-opener I had down there, and it was a real eye-opener for me. I was like, okay, wow. Someone is supporting this person that says they're a full-time musician making their living as a guitar player. One of the other things I learned is there's really not that much money even for bigger name artists. I worked in a music store down there, and I'm not going to name any names anywhere, but people would come in and rent instruments from me during the day, like a bass, and you'd see them at the time on the Nashville Now or something that night playing with a major artist with the rented bass that they had rented from me during the day. So they couldn't even afford an instrument, to play. There was one instance where I was friends with a guy who had a luthier business, and he would go out on the road with this major rock band that you would all know if I said the name, and he was the guitar tech, and they would tour Germany and blah, 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 and he'd come back and bring all of the guitar players' guitars in with them, and I'd say, well, what are you doing with all his guitars? He goes, oh, man, he can't pay me, so as he pays me, I'll give him his guitars back, so he'd come in each week with a little bit of money and buy one of his guitars back or get it out of hock as he paid him a payment on the money that he owed him for being his guitar tech. It turns out even in that huge rock band, he was making like $300 a gig touring Germany at the time, which sounds like a lot of money until you realize they only do that, 6 months out of the year. Then all of a sudden it doesn't seem like such good money anymore. So that was always a rude awakening for me. One of the best guitar players I ever came across in my life was a guy that would come in as a seasonal help. He was friends with the owner of this music store at the time. And he would play guitar, and I thought, oh my word, this guy is amazing. I mean, he could play jazz, and he would just amazingly well at every style he touched. And he was in school to become a psychiatrist. And I said, what are you doing? You could play guitar, man. That's amazing. And he goes, there's no money in this. And he was probably right in comparison. He's probably got a good business as a psychiatrist right now, and not worrying about trying to make money scratching out a living playing guitar or whatever. But those were really rude awakenings for me to learn those things as a young kid. I was 23 and didn't know any of that stuff. I come from a small town. So it was interesting for me to learn and see from these folks what it was. I also worked with a guy who played a normal job, who was working where I was working, and he played on the Grand Ole Opry every weekend. He toured with this major artist, and he was working a full-time job, so he had health insurance around doing that stuff on the weekends. So he would play on the weekends and go out and do shows with this artist and stuff, mainly on weekends, and would work full-time during the week, so he had health insurance for his family. So, all of these things were huge for me to learn that you wouldn't know if you just are if you're a big fish in a small pond, so to speak. If you're in a small town, everyone's telling you you're great, it's a different kind of world. Especially kids. A lot of times, some kids will be playing, they can play great cover songs or something. And their parents are going, oh, you should go to Berkeley, you should do this, you should do that. And they get all hyped up on that stuff, and then they realize that, well, first off, when they turn 18, no one cares anymore. It's a great quote from Joe Bonamassa from his new documentary, where he was saying, everyone was interested when I was 12 and 13, and then I turned 18, and miraculously, no one cared anymore, because now he's an adult, and there's a lot of great players as adults. So that all kind of changes as it gets older and stuff, but it's just it's an interesting discussion. I'd love to hear what you guys think. So share your thoughts on this in the bottom of the comments there. Maybe we can create a cool resource for this community or people looking for this information. Really having huge success is really a lot like winning the lottery. Someone's going to win the lottery, but the more numbers that play, you realize the shots of winning that lottery are getting smaller and smaller and smaller all the time. You used to be able to make a living in music by being music adjacent. And what I mean by that is there was lots of ways to make money around what your passion might have been without having to have a hit record. You could play, back in the day, you could play in a band, and there was tons of gigs, and you could make a good living playing 4 or 5 nights a week in a small town consistently and have enough money to buy a car and buy a house and that kind of stuff. There was enough money available to do that because there was so many gigs. And not only was there a lot of gigs, but people supported those shows. So there was people at the shows. So if you made a CD of your own, you could sell your CD at the gigs to make a little extra money, or t-shirts. So you had people at these places that were willing to support this music. Even if it was cover music at the time. People used to make CDs of cover songs and sell them at gigs, to make extra money and stuff. So there was that avenue to do it. There was also avenues, well, I want to be in the music business, I'll open a music store, right? Or a recording studio, or I'll give lessons, You could do demo session work. I used to do a bunch of demo session work for songwriters. As a matter of fact, I did a bunch of that when I was in Nashville. There was all kinds of ways to play. There was high-paying gigs, lots of them, like weddings and private function gigs, and as well as the bar gigs and the club gigs and so forth. So a lot of that was available, so you could actually make a living on a small scale. Nowadays, most of that is gone or dying anyway. So, I wouldn't want to open a music store right now. Would you guys? Can it be done? Sure, but it's going to be a hard road, It's not going to like it used to be, where you had those avenues where you could make money on those things. It was always sketchy to open any business, but you had options and possibilities to be able to supplement income with multiple streams and so forth. The other thing that's changed hugely, and it's happening everywhere, is that the cost of living is so high, it makes it very difficult to make a living in any type of a creative arts field, right? So if you are going, back in the day it was Greenwich Village. The artists would go and work in that Greenwich Village. They could afford an apartment, maybe with a roommate or something, and be able to pursue what they wanted to do. But these areas that are now the meccas for this stuff, like Austin and Nashville, the cost of living is so high, you can't afford rent without living with 4 roommates and, making a pretty serious amount of money. So that's the other thing that makes it very difficult to say I'm going to pack up and move to Nashville and try and become a songwriter or a guitar player. Is just to be able to live there, you're going to have another job, right? You're going to have some other thing. And one of the ways to do the music thing, or any business really, is the 90% rule, right? So you get yourself a job, and when you reach 90% of the income from your full-time job, you can go, okay, maybe I can make a living at this. And then you jump in and try and get the rest of it. So any way you look at it, you're going to have a job. And I always tell my students, will ask, questions, and I'll say, well, you can wait tables for that other job or work at a grocery store, or you can be an x-ray technician. Get some training so that you can support yourself to pursue your music. I'm not telling you not to pursue your dreams. I'm just saying maybe there's a smart way to do it so that you have a little bit better quality of life where you can afford to pay your rent. Maybe you are a computer programmer during the day that you can work from home, and that gives you time in the evenings to pursue music or whatever, but you still are paying your bills, covering yourself without the added pressure of trying to have 4 roommates and swing room and room and board in some small apartment or something. So that's just something to think about that has changed a lot. The other thing is everything has gotten way more expensive, but you're not going to make that much more money playing music or any art really. So the money that you would make now is really equivalent to what it was 20 years ago. It hasn't increased. As a matter of fact, it's decreased in many ways. So it hasn't kept up with that ability to pay those high rents and that sort of thing. So you're going to be making in a big city, $50 for a gig, a 4-hour gig plus tips. So hopefully the tips come in good, because the $50 isn't going to make it there by the time you park your car and do all that other stuff. Even if you make $175 a gig, let's say you played 100 gigs a year at $175 a piece, which would be pretty decent, and that's quite a few gigs to play. What are you at, $17,500 a year? That's still not that great, and for the amount of hustle that you'll have to put in to get 100 gigs, making that amount of money, and all the work to do that, it quickly makes you look back and go, man, I could make way more money at another job. The also thing that you don't have, as I alluded to earlier, is health insurance, 401ks, any of these other benefits that come from a normal job. Now, there's benefits to being self-employed, obviously, we know that. But those things, that stability can really go a long way to peace of mind and helping you build a life, that's consistent with having a wife and a house and kids and a car and all those things that we call the American dream. So that's just something to think about. A lot of times folks want to go to a music college, right? So if we think in terms of that, I always make sure people say, I want to go to music school. I always say, well, make sure you get a teaching certificate when you come out of there. So at least you can be a school teacher, teach school band or something like that. So you have something that is tangible that you can use. If you have a degree in vocal performance or something, what's that really going to get you? Not much of anything, except for if you go to Berkeley or something, probably $250,000 in student debt. Unless your family's wealthy and can pay that for you to go there, you have some money to pay that out. And there's nothing wrong with that if you do. If you have the means to pay for that and go 4 years and enjoy the Berkeley experience or one of these expensive schools, go do it, take advantage of that and stuff. But just realize you're probably not going to get your money out of that in the long run. And none of these are absolutes. There's always going to be people who say, oh, I went to Berkeley and I'm a huge star now. Okay, great. But we're in a different world than it used to be. But we're now. We just have to be realistic about it. A lot of times, as musicians, we're not realistic about what's going on. We're so positive all the time. Oh man, I'm one song away from a breakthrough, and all those sort of things. And let's even talk about that, the original music thing. So you used to be able to record your music and sell your CDs or whatever. So now we have the ability to get on all of these streaming platforms, Spotify and all this stuff. But there's so much music out there. Everyone is scratching for the same amount of attention. You know, and that's what we're all doing, right? I'm doing it here on YouTube. I just asked you to subscribe. We're all trying to scratch some attention from people to get views for what we're doing, and try and grow some type of a user base that's interested in whatever content we're creating. And it's harder and harder to do that because there's so much content available. You know, people only have so much time to check this stuff out. Whereas you used to be able to have your music, play it at a gig, you know, and you'd have your CDs afterwards that you could try and you'd walk around and sell them. And people heard the music and they were trying basically to support you in many ways. You know, because oftentimes people bought 1,000 CDs and they still had 800 of them after 10 years, you know. But still, you had the opportunity to try and do that and make a couple bucks off that. Anymore, let's just use round numbers. If you have 1 million streams, that equates to, I don't know, $1,000, something like that. So you have that huge number. Imagine if you sold 1 million CDs. Actually have a serious amount of money. But at $1,000 for all the effort you put into it and everything, it's really, you know, not a likely source of income in the grand scheme of things. The other thing that makes it so difficult now is it's very difficult just to be an artist in any form, right? If you're a writer, whatever you do, a musician, you have to know how to edit video, shoot and edit video, do website stuff, do social media, do recording and all this other stuff at home, which doesn't leave you the amount of learning curve it takes to do that stuff and time it takes to do this stuff, doesn't leave you time to be creative. And the creative element is what we need in any of these arts. Right? We need to be able to have time to be creative, to write songs or write a story or paint a picture, any of this creative arts kind of stuff. And that's one of the big changes as well that we have is people don't have time to just focus on the one thing. They're trying to do so many things to get attention and to get their creative, whatever it is, out there so people can see it or hear it or whatever they're trying to do with it. And it's just a different world. So there's a lot of opportunities, but those opportunities don't often translate into actually a way to make a living, which is difficult, which is sad. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. And I'm just sharing my experience. I'm not trying to be a negative Nelly or any of that stuff. Maybe you could take your experiences and post them below in the comments, and maybe we can get a discussion going about what is going on in the world of creative arts right now, trying to make a living in any of this stuff. And maybe your experiences are totally different. And you have been successful in that. You can share ideas on how you work for other folks to see. So I appreciate all your help and support, and I appreciate you watching these videos. And you guys have a fantastic day.